Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Today's daf is Daf Tzadik Hey in Bab Mציעא. As we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Nesuim Matzara V'Shivya. So let's understand. We're up to the 18th line on Daf Tzadik Hey Manal. The 18th line, right, right in the middle of the line. Ashkechem Lechiyah. What are we talking about? We said that there are four kinds of shomer: a shomer chinam, a shomer sacher, a socher, which is like a shomer renter who has the same malachas as a shomer sacher in terms of responsibility, and a shoel. And there's three parshas in the three sets of psukim, not even different parshas, it's all in the same parsha in Shmos Perek Chaf Beis. The first one talks about shomer chinam, he only chayev for pshia, he's only chayev for negligence. If he swears that he wasn't negligent, he's off the hook. The shomer sacher is chayev for Ganev and Aveda, and a shoel is chayev on onsen on accidents, as we've said many times. Now the Gemara was dealing yesterday up until this point with how do we know that a shoel is chayev on Ganev and Aveda? The shomer sacher is chayev on Ganev and Aveda, but he's patur on onsen on accidents. A shoel is chayev on accidents. Is he chayev on Ganev and Aveda? Well, it's a kal v'chomer, right? A shomer sacher, which is only chayev on Ganev and Aveda, not on onsen. So a shoel, which is even chayev on accidents, which are not his responsibility, not his fault, certainly he should be chayev on Ganev and Aveda, which are partially his fault. Should have been more careful. That's what the Gemara said. Okay, that's as far as chiyuv. What about p'tur? What do you mean by p'tur? The pasuk had said, that's what yesterday's Mishnah said, that if the owner that you borrowed it from was with you at the time, working for you, he was in your service at the time, you're patur. That's what it says by shoel. It doesn't say that by shomer sacher or by shomer chinam, but it says if the owner was with you, working in your employ at the time that you borrowed the animal and work with the animal, then you're off the hook. Oh, right. If you borrowed him first, if you borrowed the animal first, and then you hired it, so we said no. But if when you hired the animal, the owner came along with it in your employ, in your service, or the owner was already working for you before, but the point is that the entire time that he borrowed, from the time that you borrowed the animal, at that point in time, the owner was in your service, either simultaneous or he was already before. We're going to talk about later, does he have to stay in your service the entire time? Or the main thing is when you hired the animal, either you will see, even if you rented the animal, or you were a shomer sacher on the animal, that also applies. That if the owner was in your service or in your employ, then you're off the hook. So how do we know that? How do we know that even in cases like that, even if you're chayev on Ganev and Aveda, but let's say the Ganev, remember, the pasuk says that shoel you're chayev on even on onsen. How do we know Ganev and Aveda? Well, kal v'chomer, even a shomer sacher is chayev on Ganev and Aveda. Okay, how do we know though that if you're chayev and Ganev and Aveda, the balim, let's say the owner was in your employ the entire time that you were a shomer sacher or that you were a shoel. How do you know if you were a shoel and you borrowed it and the owner was in your employ at the time? Let's say at the time that you borrowed it, the owner was in your employ, and then there was an accident. The pasuk says you're off the hook. What about if you were a shomer sacher? He was a shomer sacher on your behalf. He was a shomer sacher on your behalf, or you were a shomer sacher, and at the time you borrowed, at the time that you became a shomer sacher or a socher for that matter, the owner was in your employ. Are you patur on Ganev and Aveda? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Why? Just like the shomer sacher is patur on the Ganev and Aveda if the bala was with him. How do we know that? We'll see the psukim. So the Gemara says like this: Ashkechem Lechiyah. So we find that a shoel is chayiv even Ganev and Aveda, even though the pasuk doesn't say that the shoel is chayiv Ganev and Aveda. It's a kal v'chomer from shomer sacher. If a shomer sacher is chayiv Ganev and Aveda, certainly a shoel. Okay. Ashkechem Lechiyah b'ftor minan. How do we know that if the shoel is patur on Ganev and Aveda if the owner was with him? Not if the shoel was a shomer sacher, but if the shoel. How do we know the shoel is chayiv on Ganev and Aveda? It's a kal v'chomer from shomer sacher. How do we know that? The Gemara now asks, how do we know though? Okay, he's chayiv on Ganev and Aveda, kal v'chomer. How do we know that he's patur on Ganev and Aveda if the owner was in his service at the time that he borrowed it? Ashken l'chiv liftor, that he's patur if the owner was with him at the time, was working for him at the time in Olam. Why don't you say it's a kal v'chomer? If when there was an accident but the owner was in my employ, right? My owner was an employee. I'm potter. So certainly if there was a Geneva Aveda, that's different. Shvur Mesa was an accident. So by an accident, it's more likely that I should be off the hook. If the owner was with me, I'll be off the hook. But Geneva Aveda, where there's more responsibility, I should have been more careful. Maybe then the owner being with me would not get me off the hook. Again, the pasuk says that if I borrow it and the owner's in my employ when I borrowed it, then I'm off the hook. But we learn out from a Kal V'chomer that if you borrow it, you're also chayiv on Geneva Aveda. Well, what happens if it was Geneva Aveda, if it was stolen or lost while the owner was in my employ? What would you say there? Elagomer mishomer sacher. We learn it from shomer sacher. Shomer sacher. If you're shomer sacher and the owner was with you, you're also potter. Okay, you're also potter. So they're going to shomer sacher guf minolan. How do you know shomer sacher is potter? Shomer sacher we know is chayiv on Geneva Aveda. How do we know he's potter if the owner was with him at the time? This is Gar Mechiyuv with the Shomer Sacher, Mechiyuv with the Shoel. We'll learn out the Chiyuv of Shomer Sacher, learn out from the Chiyuv of Shoel. We'll see how that's learned out. First, we assume it's just a comparison. Mal Olam Babal and Potter, Avkam Bal and Potter, very simple. Just like by Shoel, you see that if the owner was with him at the time, he's potter. What is the Shoel chayiv on? On Onsen. But if the owner was with him, he's potter. Well, the Shomer Sacher, what is he chayiv on? Geneva Aveda. Okay, but if the owner was with him, he's potter. Okay, so we want to say, and therefore, what's the? How do you know that a shoel is chayiv and Geneva Aveda? Kal V'chomer from shomer sacher, right? Okay, and shomer sacher. How do we know that if shomer sacher, if you were hired to watch it, and the owner is with you, you're potter there? Well, we're learning out from Shoel, just like over there, just mahon bal potter, afkan bal potter. So, how are you going to learn that? Just from a comparison? Even if it's simply a comparison, then what? Just like by Shoel. What a Shoel is chayiv on Onsen. But if the owner is with him, he's potter. The same thing, shomer sacher. What is shomer sacher chayiv on Geneva Aveda? And if the owner is with him, he's potter. Equal enough, you can say, no. Shomer sacher is different. You know why a shomer shoel is more likely to be potter on when the owner is with him on Onsen? Because what is a shoel chayiv on? He's chayiv on onsen. Well, that's an accident. That's more likely to be potter. Whereas you want to compare it to a shomer sacher, say a shomer sacher is like a shoel. Just like by shoel, when he's chayiv on, he's potter if the owner's with him. Where a shomer sacher is chayiv on, he's potter when the owner's with him. And what's the comparison? Shoel is an accident. An accident, you should be potter. More as far to say that you should be potter if the owner's with you because it was an accident. Shomer sacher is not such an accident. Is not such a big accident. So how do you know that by shomer sacher, even though the pasuk doesn't say by shomer sacher in baal of imo if the owner's there, but we'll see, we'll learn it out from a hekesh. Okay, but just like we say, just like by shomer sacher, just like by shoel, if the owner's with him, he's potter. By shomer sacher, what is the shomer sacher chayiv on Geneva Aveda? He's also potter if the owner's with him. How do you know? You learn about shomer sacher from shoel. Elam records based on the pasuk. It says v'chi yishal. The first psukim talk about kiteni shel reu kesav v'kelim. That's a shomer chinam. Then it says kiteni shel reu chamor shor sevachal beima umeisa nishbara ein roa shvos shem derem. If you swear it wasn't an accident, you're only chayiv on and gonna be gonna if you got to pay. That's shomer sacher. Then afterwards it says v'chi yishal. And if you borrowed it, v'chi the vav connects into it's a hekesh. That's what Gemara says now. Elam records v'chi yishal. When it talks about shomer chinam, it says ki teinish. When it talks about shomer sacher, it says ki teinish. When it talks about shoel, it says v'chi yishal. Connecting the parsha of shoel with the previous parsha of shomer sacher. El makra v'chi yishal vav mosef al inyarishan. The vav adds on to the previous discussion about shomer sacher, the previous topic. The vav mosef al inyarishan. The yomad el yomi tachton. We'll learn out the previous drasha of what shomer sacher from shoel. What are we learning out? Just like by shoel, what he's chayiv on. He's chayiv on onsen, but if the owner was with him, he's potter. You know what? The same thing by shomer sacher. What is a shomer sacher chayiv on Geneva Aveda? Well, if the owner's with him, he's potter. Okay, vakati shomer sacher lo gamar. But we haven't learned out shoel from shomer sacher, right? That's fine. So you say that's how you know that a shomer sacher is like a shoel if the owner's with him. But how do we know that if a shoel is also potter on on Geneva and Aved if the owner's with him. The pasuk says if a shoel borrows something and the owner's with him and there's an accident, then you're off the hook. How do we know that a shoel has more responsibility if it was Geneva and Aveda in his possession while the owner's with Betty's potter there? You could say, you can't learn that just like, in other words, we've established now that a Shomer Sachar, right? If the owner was with him when there was Geneva and Aveda, he's off the hook. What he's chayiv on is Geneva, and he's always with him off the hook. What a shoel is chayiv on, Onsin, he's off the hook when. How do we know that a shoel is chayiv on even Geneva and Aveda? It's a kal v'chomer from Shomer Sachar. But the kal v'chomer doesn't lead to. How do you know now that a shoel is potter on Geneva and Aveda if the owner was with him? Akati, that's what we said. Akati, how are we going to learn out? Akati shoel mishomer sachar. How are you going to learn that out? That just like by shomer sachar, you put on Geneva and Aveda if the owner's with him. The same thing by shoel. Shomer sachar is less responsibility. He's potter on accidents. Shvur mesa means if it was injured or died. So since a shoel has more responsibility, maybe he'd be chayiv even on Geneva and Aveda if the owner's with him. Ella Geneva and Aveda b'shoel l'chayiv minol. How do we know Geneva and Aveda is chayiv on what? By a shoel? What? The gomer mishomer sachar, the kal v'chomer. Dayo love meditin. There's a concept when you learn a kal v'chomer, it can't be any more stringent than the thing you're learning it from. It's enough. Like Dayo, it's sufficient to learn Amenadin. Lios kanadin. Magan Aveda shomer sachar balam potter. Just like Geneva and Aveda by shomer sachar, the balam was potter because that we learned out from the hekish of chiyishal. After Geneva and Aveda shoel nami, the balam potter. Geneva and Aveda shoel also potter. So therefore, a shoel, if you've borrowed something and the owner's with you, not only you potter if there was an accident, you're potter on Geneva and Aveda too. Because how do you know b'chlau? How do you know b'chlau that you're chayiv on Geneva and Aveda by shoel kal v'chomer from shomer sachar? Well, shomer sachar, the Geneva and Aveda that he's chayiv on is only if the owner's not with him, so it can't be any worse. We're at the first of the wide lines. That's good if you hold it. This concept of dayo that the limitation of this kal v'chomer. Elamanda, let's say that if you don't hold the Michael Maimer, he might say, listen, you learn a kal v'chomer that if shomer sachar is chayiv and Geneva Aveda shows also chayiv and Geneva Aveda. Now you want to say though that just by shomer sachar, the Geneva and Aveda, your potter, if the owner is with you by shoel, the same thing, maybe not. Shoel has more responsibility. Elam Rekra, we're going back to this hekesh of V'chiyishal. V'chiyishal, Vav Mosvayin Rishon. So the shoel, right, by shoel we said adds on to the previous topic. V'yumad el mitachim, so we said before, you learn on shomer sachar from shoel, just like by shoel, your potter if the owner is there. Same thing by shomer sachar, your potter on whatever you're chayiv on if the owner's there. V'tachtam mi'el yon. And we're also going to learn out the shoel from the shomer sachar. And this is a hekesh ain't meshivin ala hekesh. So it comes out. If you look in the first of the wide lines in Rashi, take a look at the first of the wide lines in Rashi. Geneva and Aveda, the shomer sachar, mechiyu with a shoel. Right, mechiyu with a shoel. Mashvur, mesa the shoel, b'balam potter. Afchiyu with a shomer sachar, b'balam also potter. That's the basic idea. Whatever shoel is chayiv he's chayiv on onsin, he's potter if the owner's there. The same thing by shomer sachar because we have this hekesh. The tachtan niel, and now we're going to allow shoel from shomer sachar. Ma shomer sachar chayiv Geneva and Aveda, shelo b'balam. The general idea chayiv on Geneva and Aveda. Shoel is also chayiv. In other words, we're learning out not from a kal v'chomer, How do you know? The pasuk says a shoel is chayiv on onsin. Well, certainly it's chayiv on Geneva and Aveda. That's a kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer, it doesn't work for everything. We're not going to learn from it. We're going to learn from the hekesh. Just like by shomer sachar is chayiv on Geneva and Aveda. Shoel is also chayiv on Geneva and Aveda. Uma shomer sachar b'balam potter. Just like shomer sachar, the Geneva and Aveda is potter. Why? Because we learned that it's sort of circular. How do you know by shomer sachar that it's b'balam potter? Why? Because you learned that out from shoel. Shoel also came to meshivin ala hekesh. In other words, that shomer sachar is potter b'balam is learned out from the hekesh. And then we turn that around and we say that the shomer sachar b'chlal, who's chayiv on Geneva and Aveda, the shoel is also chayiv on Geneva and Aveda. But where is he chayiv on Geneva and Aveda? Just like by shomer sachar, he's only chayiv on Geneva and Aveda if the owner is not there. The same thing by shoel is also only chayiv if the owner's not there. Back in the Gemara now, 4 lines into the wide lines of the Gemara. Itmar, Shia babala. What happens if the pasuk says, right? The pasuk we've seen that if it was an accident, the owner's there, or by shomer sachar and Geneva and Aveda, or by shoel Geneva and Aveda, the owner's there, you're potter. What happens? The basic responsibility for not being negligent. What happens if you were negligent when the owner was there? Now, Who's chayiv on negligence? Everybody, right? Now even a shomer chinam, right? So what about shiva balam? What's the halacha there? You pater chayiv. If the watchman, the guard, if he's a shomer chinam, a shomer sacher, a shoel, and he's posher, what do you say there? Pligi baravach rabin. It's machlokas. Chadam mechayiv chanam pater. Mandam mechayiv. One is a chayiv ksaver. Mikrudish lefanav v'lo lifnei fanav. Remember, what did I say? What's the order in the psukim? Shomer chinam, shomer sacher, then shoel. So he says, okay, we have this vav mosa, we have the hekesh between shomer sacher and shoel. So we're going to darshan the pasuk before, right? We're going to say that shomer sacher is like shoel, but lo lifnei fanav, not the previous to the previous. We're not going to apply it to shomer chinam. Hilkach in balav imo, that the psukim that says by shoel, if the owner is with you, you're off the hook, you're potter. Asham Mechinim, it doesn't say by Asham Mechinim. It says it on Shoel, and we're applying it also to the previous psukim of Shomer Sacher, but not all the way back to Asham Mechinim. So it doesn't say Balavim Asham Mechinim. Pshiyanam Shomer Sacher v'Shoel lo ksiv. It doesn't say Pshia that you're chayiv on by Shomer Sacher v'Shoel. How do we know? Look at Shomer Sacher v'Shoel lechiyav for chiyav. If a Shomer Mechinim is chayiv on Pshia, certainly where you're paid or where you're borrowing it, you're getting most of the pleasure because you don't even have to pay. Right there, you're certainly chayav. Aval babalam liftor. You want to say that if you were posheya with the owner was there, you should be potter. Even my shomer doesn't say that. My time. Why not? Miksiv im balavimo. Miksiv kiksiv im balavimo yisham. When it says if the owner's with you, you don't have to pay. Ashol v'ashomer sacher. When it says it on Shoel and on Shomer Sacher based on the Hekesh. Ahana chiyuv with the Sibu, the chiyuv that it talks about there, the Hedya, that it says the ones that it says explicitly. What does it say explicitly? That a Shomer Sacher is chayiv on Geneva and Aveda, and a Shoel is chayiv on Onsin. That's where it applies. Who does it? It doesn't apply to Shia. And the Imbalavim was Bechla not going on Shemachinim because that was two parshios before, two paragraphs before, let's call it. Right? So therefore it's not going on Shomer Chinim, it's only going on Shomer Sacher and on Shoel. Okay, this set of Shomer Sacher and Shoel chayiv am Shia is a kal v'chomer. You're chayiv even on accidents and even on Genei B'nei. You certainly chayiv am Shia, but that you say that you're potter. Why would you be potter when it says in Balavivo? It's only going on what's written in the parsha of Shoel and Shomer Sacher respectively, which is accidents and Genei B'nei. Manda or potter, the one who says no, that if you were poshe and the owner was with you, you still chayiv. Ksaver mikra nishlo fanav v'lifnei fanav. In other words, when it says in Balavimo by Shoel, it's going also on Shomer Sacher and on Shomer Chinam. In other words, the Vav connection, right? The Vav connection that connects it, the heck is going, not only does it go back to Shomer Sacher, even go back to Shomer Chinam. So it said, Shomer Chinam, the only chiyuv is Pshia. The only chiyuv is negligence. And it says, if the owner is with you, you're off the hook. In Balavimo, Shomer Chinam Namiksiv, it says that too. So now I'm going to try to prove one way or another. Tanan, Hashol Pora. Now, this is really our Mishnah, but it's slightly different. The wording here is slightly different than the Gersa we have in our Mishnah. We're 3 lines from the bottom of Tzadik Hayim and Aleph. Tanan, Ashol Parah V'Shol Baleimo. Again, together with the owner, you hired the animal, right? You borrowed the animal. Or Ashol Parah V'Sachar Balei. Or when you borrowed the animal, you hired the owner with you. Either you borrowed the animal and you either borrowed the owner with him at the time, or you rented the owner with him at the time. Sachar baleh, you hired him, right? That's like the sachar. Shol baleh, let's say you borrowed the owner, o sachran, or you hired him. The achakach shol par mesa pater, as you said before, Avram, right? It has to be at the time when you hired the animal, right? The owner was already in your employ, either simultaneous or before. If you hired him afterwards, it doesn't apply. Either Shemachim doesn't say anything about Shemachinam, doesn't say anything about there. So what do you see? That the concept of Imbalavimo does not apply to Shemachinim, it only applies to Shoel and maybe Shomer Sacher. It doesn't say anything about Shomer Sacher. It doesn't say that a Shomer Sacher. Remember, the pasuk only says Imbalavimo by Shoel, but we applied it to Shomer Sacher. It doesn't say anything in the Mishnah about Shomer Sacher. Elatana Milsa. So the fact that he doesn't mention Shemachinim here does not mean that the Balavimo does not apply to Shemachinim. You want to prove that it doesn't apply to Shemachinim, meaning that a Shemachinim would be chayav. Even what Hashem Mechim's chayav on was pshia, even a balavim would be chayav because it doesn't mention over here that any ptur. The answer is no. It doesn't say anything about Shomer Sacher evil. Tamech Shomer Sacher miktani. Elatana milsa diksiv behedya tani. Dasim midrasha lo tani. Our mission is only talking about things that it says beferish in the pasuk, like a shoel who has Baal of Imo, where the owner is his employee at the time that he borrows the animal. But the things that it doesn't say befavor, it's only learned out of a drasha, doesn't mention. So just like Shomer Sacher, the halacha applies. In other words, not only if you borrowed an animal, it's even if you rented an animal or rented any item and the owner was with you at the time that you are potter. Doesn't say anything about Shomer Sacher, and yet we said it applies. So it does. So it could apply to Shomer Chinim too. Therefore, it could be that you're potter on Shia Babal. Tashma, another proof. Shala, this price says a little bit more. It says Shala B'Shal Balaima. Or let's say you borrowed the animal and the owner with it, or you hired the animal and the owner with it, right? Ima. Or shala, let's say you borrowed the animal and you hired the owner, ima. Or sakra, or you hired hired the animal b'shalba ima. Again, either you borrow the animal and you hired the owner, or you hired the animal and borrowed the owner ima. Even though the owner is working somewhere else, we'll see what that means. Umesa, but he's working in your employ in your service at the time the animal died, you're potter. Sabrua, we assume now how money Rabbi Yehuda, it goes like Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Socher Kashamar Sacher Dami. Again, we're talking about, we said that the rules of Balaam apply not only to Shoel, but also to a Shomer Sacher. Here it's talking about renting the animal or renting the owner. We're assuming now when you're renting that a socher is like a Shomer Sacher. Now this Tana mentioned not only Shoel, which it says Befeish in the Torah Ba'alav, it mentions Shomer Sacher also. The Mishnah only mentions Shoel. You borrowed an animal, and you borrowed the owner or hired him with you. It doesn't say anything about renting the animal. It talks about borrowing the animal. We said it, Shomer Sacher applies to that too, but this brisa mentions even hiring the animal, meaning renting the animal. Hiring the animal is renting the animal, right? We're assuming now it goes like Rabbi Yehuda says, it's like Shomer Sacher. So therefore, effectively mentioned here Shomer Sacher. The rules of Shomer Sacher would apply in Baal of Imo. He learns out in Russia, which is Shomer Sacher or a socher, which is like Shomer Sacher. Like that's mentioned Shomer Chinim, indicating that Shomer Chinim of Shia Babalim by a Shomer Chinim would be chayav, because by Shomer Chinim the only chayav is Shia, and it's mashma that you don't say if Baal of Imo by Shomer Chinim you're off the hook. Well, the only thing you're on the hook for by Shomer Chinim is Shia, right? The only thing you're on the hook for. It doesn't mention over here that if you're a Shomer Chinim, you're off the hook if the owner's with you. The answer is no. You can't. So that shows you the Shomer Chinim that Shia Babalim would be chayav, not potter. Whereas no, how many Rav Meir goes like Rav Meir Dama Socher Kashomer Chinim. When he says over here Socher is like Kashomer Chinim. So effectively, he is saying it could. You could argue and say no, Socher is like Kashomer Chinim. And if you hire the animal and has a rule like the Shomer Chinim, and it says over here you're potter if the Balam is with you. So it could very well be that Shia Babalim is also potter. The Tana Shomer Chinim, who had done the Shomer Sacher, the same thing applies to Shomer Chinim. If Shomer Sacher would be potter, the same thing would apply. The Tana Shomer Chinim, and all we're talking about here is a Shomer Chinim because the socher is like a Shomer Chinim according to Rav Meir. And the same thing would apply to Shomer Sacher. It applies to Shomer Chinim, you're off the hook if the owner's with you on your Pshia. Same thing by Shomer Sacher. Or so therefore it could very well be, but we can't prove anything from here. We can't prove that Pshia Babalim is chayiv over here. It could be the Pshia Babalim is potter. Or I could say, if you want to say that the Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yehuda, where you could say maybe Rabbi Yehuda, maybe the Mishnah does go like Rabbi Yehuda, but it goes like Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, the way Rabba Baravua learns that he learns the machlokas the other way around, opposite. Rabbi Yehuda says it's like a Shomer Chinim. In other words, that this brisa is saying that if you borrow the animal or you were a Shomer Chinim on the animal, but the owner is with you, you're off the hook. Oh, again, by Shomer Chinim, what are you off the hook from? You're only on the hook for Pshia. So you're off the hook if the owner's with you. So then you could say that Shia Babalim would be Potter. And Enochanami, the Rambam's Girsa, when we started the Sugis Itmar, Pshia Babalim, Pligi Baravach, Chadar Machayv, Chadar Potter. According to the Rambam Secha, and if that's correct, then a Shomer Chinim is also Pshia Babalim Potter. In other words, whether you borrowed an animal, whether you rented the animal, whether you were hired to watch the animal, or whether you were simply a free watchman, a free guard, you weren't paid at all, but the owner is with you, you're off the hook. That's the Gzeres HaKosov. Now, how long does the owner have to be with you? Amar Rav Hamnuna, we're about 12 lines down on Amid Beis, Sadak Amid Beis. Amar Rav Hamnuna, Lola Muchayev, Ad Shetei Parav, Choresh Ba, Chamor Macham Acharel. You're only chayev, in other words, you're chayev, a show is chayev on what? shomer chinam is chayiv on shia. A shomer sacher or a socher, let's say, is chayiv even on gedei v'aveda. A shol is chayiv on everything, right? Shia, kal v'chomer. And he's chayiv on gedei v'aveda, as we said, that can even buy a hekesh more than a kal v'chomer. And shol is chayiv on onsin. But if the owner's with them, they're off the hook. All of them, they're off the hook. Okay. How long does the owner have to be with them? Clearly, he has to be with them at the time that he borrowed the animal, or that he rented the animal, right? Or that he was hired as a guard on the animal. Yes, there he has to be there. But he's also only potter, according to Rav Nuna, only if not only is he there when he hired him, when he borrowed the animal, but the owner was with him the whole time, and the owner was in his service working. Like I'm renting out my animal, but I come along with it, because I'll take care of the animal. I'm the owner of the animal. I have to be in your employ the entire time until the accident. In fact, working on the same thing the animal's working on. Again, that the para, and he's plowing with him, and he's with them. Chamor, if it's a chamor, he's driving the donkey's driving something. In other words, the owner has to be working with the animal in your service, and he has to be there the entire time until the accident. Almut Saber, so according to Rav Nuna, Ba'alavimo, it says Ba'alavimo Akula Milsa, it's on everything. Not emo only when you rented it, but he has to be with you the whole time, working with you, and he has to be there from the time of borrowing or renting, whatever, until the time of the accident. Akula Milsa Mash. Masav Rav. Now we're going to disprove Rav Nuna. Shalom Shal Ba'alaimo. You borrowed the animal, and you borrowed the owner with it, or Sacher, or you hired the animal. Sacher Ba'alima, or Sacher B'Shal Ba'alaima, or we had this before, or you hired the animal and you borrowed the owner with him, or Shala, you borrowed the animal, Sacher Ba'alaima. In other words, the owner might say, listen, you can borrow this animal, but I'm only gonna allow it if you hire me to go with the animal. He says, listen, even though the owner is working somewhere else in your employ, he's cooking for you while the animal's out in the field plowing. Umesa, and the animal died, you're potter, because he's working in your employ. Ma'alav melachacheres. What does melachacheres? Right? Doesn't it mean he's working for you elsewhere? Makam acher. Doesn't it mean he's working in a different melacha? So number one, we're disproving the concept that Rav Nuna said he has to be working with the animal and in your employ the whole time. So number one, you see, he doesn't be working with the animal because it says makam acher. Doesn't it mean melachacheres lo? Both of he's really in the same melacha. What does it mean makam acher? The kamarpi bazal kamon. He's not actually walking along beside the animal. He's digging up the dirt before the animal. He's softening up the dirt. The animal's going to come and plow. The owner is softening it up to make it easier for the animal. So he is really not working in a different work. Makamacher simply means he's right in front of him. He's not exactly next to him. What do you mean? The sefer says al gabah. Sefer says he's working nearby. Since the sefer says he's working next to it, right? Next to it. So what do you mean over here? It's also next to it. The Reisha must be talking about where he's working a totally different job. The Tani Sefer Shala Yachkach Shalbala. The Sefer says if you rented it and then afterwards you borrowed the owner, or Sachar Yachkach Sachar Bal, and then afterwards you rented the owner. Even though the owner is now working together, he's plowing together with the animal, and the animal dies. You're chayav, right? Because why? Because in this case you only hired the owner after you hired the animal. You're chayav. So why did it have to say over here? There it talks about next to it. It's mashma that the Reish we're talking about, even when you're working somewhere else. No, Reish b'sefer both malacha. Both Reish and Sefer speak about he's working the same job. We're defending Rav Hamnuna now. The Reish or Busik Mashma Sefer, because there's a chiddush in the Reish and the Sefer. Reish or Busik Mashma the Afagav the Lav al Gabah, even though he's not necessarily right next to it, right? But he's plowing together. He's plowing in front of the Elbiyosa Malacha. Right, since the owner was with him at the time that he borrowed, you're potter. Even though he's not working right next to the animal, but he's also plowing with it. Even though he's not next to the animal, but since he's working with it and he was there in the borrower's employ from the time that he borrowed the animal, you're potter. But Sefer Abu Sikabashwan, the Sefer says, even though he's standing next to the animal, plowing next to him, since he wasn't there at the time of borrowing of the animal, chayav the owner, you're chayav to pay. The Gemara says, why is that big chiddush? Yeah, if the Reish was really talking about he was working somewhere else, he was cooking for you while the animal was plowing the seifa b'osam malacha, and the seifa thing where he's working with the same job, but he wasn't there at the time that you hired the animal. That's a chiddush, because you're telling me in the ratio you're teaching me that even though he was doing a different work, and the seifa you're teaching me, even though he wasn't doing that, even though he was doing the same work, but he wasn't there at the time that you hired the animal. So that's the chiddush that you're chayiv there too. If you're talking about they're both in the same, what's the chiddush? They're both in the same work. So you might be telling me a chiddush that if he's not there, the owner's not there at the time of that you hired the animal, you're chayiv. But what's the chiddush in the ratio then? In the same job. So what's the chiddush of that you're chayiv? It's obviously the same work. What's the chiddush? But Tanya, and we have a fair Shabraisa which teaches us otherwise. Says in Baal of Imo, says if the owner's with him, you don't have to pay. You're potter, you're off the hook. Doesn't say if the owner is not with him, obviously you have to pay. It says if the owner's with you, you don't have to pay. So obviously the deduction is if the owner is not with you, you have to pay. What is the chiddush? If the owner's not there, you have to pay. To teach you that if he was with you at the time that you borrowed the animal, he doesn't be the whole time. Again, in Balavimo, like lo yishalim, you don't have to pay. In Ein Balavimo, you do have to pay to teach me that sometimes if the owner's with you, you have to pay. Sometimes you don't have to pay, right? Depends. What does that mean? What does it mean? To tell you that he doesn't be there the whole time. If he was there with you, so in Balavimos, not the whole time, even if he's only there a little bit. If he was there at the beginning, at the time that you borrowed it, he doesn't have to be there when the animal had the accident. But if he was there at the time of Mesa, in other words, if he, in one case, it works even if he was only there once. There's two times. There's a time when you borrowed the animal, a time when the accident happened. So he's saying, what is the chiddush of it? In Balav Imo lo yishalim. What does that mean? Not if he wasn't there the whole time. As long as he was there at the time you borrowed it, you don't have to pay. But if he was there at the time of the accident, but he wasn't there at the time you borrowed the animal, then you do have to pay. And you see another brayso, the same thing in reverse. From the fact that it says if the owner's not there, you have to pay. Don't have to, you do have to pay. What does it mean if the owner is there, you don't have to pay? He doesn't have to be there the whole time, right? If he's not there at all, obviously you have to pay. What does Imbalavim teach me? He doesn't have to be there the whole time. Once he left the Rishus Mashal, once you borrowed it, shachas for 1 second, but Baalim with the owner, umesa, you're potter, you're off the hook. So here's a brayso which says you don't have to be there the whole time, right? You don't have to be there the whole time. You don't certainly don't have to be working with him because all you have to do is you only have to be there at the time that you borrowed the animal. You had at the time you borrowed the animal, the owner had to be in your service as well. Either you borrowed the animal and you borrowed the owner or hired the owner simultaneously, or the owner was already in your employ when you hired his animal. But he doesn't have to be there at the time of the accident. So clearly he could be doing something else or he doesn't have to be there at all. So that's a kasha on Rav Amnuna. And Abaye said, we had yesterday Machlokes of Yosha and Rav Yonas, the famous Machlokes, and the pasuk says Nishbar Omeis. Does Nishbar Omeis mean or? Can it mean and or? Or Rav Yonas says it can mean and or. According to Rav Yosha, it always means and unless you have a specific word separating them. So Abaye learns like Rav Yosha, it says that it always means and unless you have, doesn't mean or unless you have a separation. Mutasik Rav Yosha, he learns the psukim like Rav Yosha. Rav Savlik Rav Yonasan, he learns Rav Yonasan and Mutasik Rav Yonasan. Abaye Savlik Rav Yosha, Abaye says learns like Rav Yosha, Mutasik Rav Yosha. How? Plus he gets ball of Einim Sham Sham. The owner's not there, you have to pay. Time it a lesson with Abaye because he's not there at all, right? Ball of Einim Sham, he's not there at all. It's mashma if he's there for one of them. One of them, what? One of them, either at the time of borrowing or at the time of the accident. The less bachado, he's bachado less by your potter. So that's mashma 101 potter. And then it says, uksiv is the gear. So uksiv in baladimo leishalim. If the owner's there, you don't have to pay. Time it is because he's there for both of them. If he's there for one of them, you are chayav to pay. So we have a stira. From the first part of the pasuk, it says Rav Yosha learns when it says you're there, it means you're there totally. When it says you're not there totally. Well, that gives us into a contradiction because the first thing it says if the owner's not there, you have to pay. Why? Because he's not there at all. Mashma, if he's there for one of them, you would be potter. Then it says if the owner is there, you don't have to pay. Mashma, if you're there for both of them, if you're there for one of them, you don't have to pay. How do you resolve that? Lo milcha, to tell you, well, for one of them, if he's there for one of them, you're potter. If he's missing both of them, you're chayiv. If he's there for both of them, you're potter. But the fact if he's there for one and not for the other one, we have a stira. So which one is it? Lo milcha, that if he's there for shas sheila, ein tzarich limas b'shas shvur mesa. If he's there at the time of the borrowing, doesn't be at the time of the accident. Hayim b'shas shvur mesa. But if he's there at the time of the accident, that doesn't absolve you. Tzarich limas b'shas sheila, because one pasuk is mashma one way, that if he's there for one and not for the other, you're potter. One's mashma if you're there for one, not for you're chayiv. How do you resolve it? The answer just depends which one he's there for. If he's there for at the time of the borrowing, at the time that he rented the animal or borrowed the animal, and the owner was there, then you're off the hook, even if he wasn't there at the time of the accident. But if he was there at the time of the accident, then he's not off the hook if he wasn't there at the time of the borrowing. In other words, there's two events. There's the time of the borrowing, the time of the accident. One pasuk is mashma that if he was there for one and not the other, you're chayiv. One's mashma if you're there for one, you're not the other, you're potter. How do you resolve that stira? It depends which one you're there for. If you were there at the time of the borrowing, that's good enough. If the owner was there at the time of the borrowing, it's good enough. If he was there at the time of the accident, it's not good enough. That's how Abaye learns it, based on Rav Oshia's drasha of imbal of imo, who's there. Everything includes everything, not separation. Rava, though, at the top of Sadik, Rava said like Rav Yonasan, like Rav Yonasan, meaning when it says something, it doesn't mean everything. It can mean and or. Matasa correct Rav Yonasan, right? Why does he takes out that word of Tanya? Suppose in Balavi, Malay Sham, the owner's there, you don't have to pay. Mashma Yisabatabat, Mashma is there entire time for both events. So Mashma Nami, the Chiyisa Bachara Bales Bachara Potter. It's also Mashma. If he's there for one of them, you're Potter. It's Mashma both, or if he's there at all, you're Potter. Exhibit says Balav Ainim, if the owner's not there, Shalim Yisham, you have to pay. Mashma less he's not there at all. Or Mashma Nami Kiyisa Bachara Bales Bachara Chayev. Or it's Mashma, he's not there part of the time, because Yonason learns and or, right? It doesn't mean everything, it can mean everything, it can mean one or the other. It's also Mashma Kiyisa Bachara Bales Bachara, you're Chayev. So again, he's got the same contradiction. It's mashma that from the first part of the pasuk, the first second balagin is mashma. If he's there for one and not for the other, you're potter. Then it's from the other pasuk, it's mashma. If he's there for one and not for the other, you're chayiv. So how do you resolve the contradiction? If you were there at the time of born, you don't have to be there at the time of the accident. But if you're there at the time of the accident, you're not absolved as the borrower unless he was also there at the time of the borrowing. Maybe it's the other way around. So maybe it's the other way around. You have to be there for one, not for the other. Maybe the one you have to be there for is the accident, right? If the owner was there at the time of the accident, then you're off the hook. Not if he was there at the time of the borrowing. So the Mustafa Sheila, it's probably at the time of the borrowing is that's when he's bringing it into his rishus. Shvur Mesa Dipa, maybe Shvur Mesa is the one where he has to be there and they'd be potter for him if the owner was there at the time of the accident. Because that's when you're chayiv in the onsen. That's when the accident happened. So you must if he didn't borrow it, then the accident doesn't mean anything. It's not yours. It's not in your possession. The other way, if there wasn't an accident, what did borrowing do? We're talking about you have to have both. You had to borrow it and then have an accident. The borrowing is more. That's the time when you're chayiv in the animal. In other words, comes into your rishus at that point. If the owner was with you at that point, you're potter on any accidents, even if he wasn't there at the time of the accident, even if the owner wasn't there at the time of the accident. Rav Ashi Amar, we've already disproved Rav Hamnuna, but we're just explaining how Abaye goes like Rav Yoshua and Psukim that way. The Psukim indicate that you don't have to be there to be off the hook. If the owner's with you, you don't have to be off the hook the entire time, only for one or the other, right? That's how both Psukim, both according to Abaye and Rava, and both according to Rav Yoshua and Rav Yonasan, respectively. The question is which one? The answer will say it's more mustavra that if the owner was with you at the time of the shale when you took responsibility and you're chayiv to feed it, then you're off the hook. Rav Ashi Amri says you can see it in the pasuk. Pasuk says v'chiyish ish may imre ehu. Pasuk says if you borrow something from the other guy, below re'ehu, not that you're borrowing it from him. That means he's not coming with you. If I'm borrowing you and your horse, I wouldn't say may imre ehu. I'm borrowing everything. No, below re'ehu, sham sham harehu. It's mashma if the owner's with you at the time you borrowed it, you're butter. So if that's the case, if you learn it out from those words, what do I need the pasuk if the owner's with you, the owner's not with you? You're learning it from the pasuk of the chiyil ish may imre'eu. If you borrow this item, this animal, this pot, this pan, this glass, whatever, from him, but not him with you. So what do you need the pasuk of balavimo and balavim? What do you need it for? Zilav hanach. If it wouldn't be for these pasukim of balav einimo and balavimo. I would say, the crow. That's the crow. It's simply the way the pasuk speaks. If you borrow something from Yankel, Reuben borrows something from Shimon, that's how you talk. But once you have balavimo and balavim, you're telling me that it depends if the owner's with you, and then you're off the hook. If the owner's not with you, you're on the hook. Then we can darshan b'chiyah. Which one is the chiyuv for? Is it for when he's with you at the time of the borrowing, at the time of the accident? Then we darshan b'chiyah shmei imriyeh, who borrowed from him. Then you're chayav. He's not with you, but if he's with you, you're off the hook. All right, we'll pick it up from Boy Ram Rachama tomorrow. We're about the same place here, about 18 lines down as we started with today's Daf.
The only time you can hire is when you borrow it and the owner's not there.
No, if the owner's there for sure at the time of the accident, if the owner's with you, like Rav Nuna said, though, Rav Nuna said you're only off the hook. The owner's there the whole time. But we say no, you don't need that. You don't need that. You don't need it. If you're, it's not that you're only chayav, you're only putter then. You're putter if the owner's with you at the time that you borrowed it. Makes no difference if he's there afterwards or not. Makes no difference. Yeah.
It seems to you have to have a situation that you're borrowing something from someone who's not there.
No, but you have to borrow to be chayav. No, he's not. No, not that he's not there. He's not in your service. He's not in your employ. You borrow it from him, but are you also using him at the time that you're hiring him and making him work for you? Either you're borrowing him or paying him. But I mean, of course, you're borrowing it from him. You're taking it from him. Yeah. No, the chiyuv is that you're only off the hook if you borrow it from him and you take him in your employ at that time, even if 5 minutes later he quits. Yeah. Have a good day.
For a cypher? How does it work for a cypher?
I didn't hear you, Rami. What?
How does it work for a socher? Balavimo by a socher.
Same thing. Same thing. I hired the animal.
Not by a socher, by
and you're working for me.
No, not by the other one. Where is it? Where you're renting it to somebody else. No, by a shorel, I understand. That's the first one. What's the fourth one?
Shomer Sacher. We came out that either I'm a Shomer Chinam, right? Let's say Reuben and Shimon. Shimon takes the item from Reuben. Either Shimon takes it as a Shomer Chinam, or he rents it from him. He's a socher, or he's hired by Reuben.
Oh, okay. When you're hired by Reuben, so how does Balavimo work by a hired?
By a hire? I hired your car. And I hired
the guy. In other words, I hired the guy.
Got it?
Yeah, got it.
Okay, good. Have a good night.
Good night.